We have lots to discuss in today's video, including the latest trade talk around the NHL. In today's rumor mill, we're looking at teams like the Vancouver Canucks, the Utah Hockey Club, Patrick Laine, could he possibly end up with the Washington Capitals, and Brady Tkachuk has finally spoken in an interview to dispel a lot of the trade rumors. We'll discuss that scenario, plus the Oilers have hired a new GM in Stan Bowman, to more rumors around the future of Evgeny Kuznetsov, and some big signings today, including Sabres signing goalie Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here today. Let's start with some signings that came through today. We have one in particular that's quite substantial, and it's for the Buffalo Sabres, avoiding arbitration and signing goaltender Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, or UPL as most of us call him. Gets a 5-year contract with an average annual value of $4.75 million. So this is a pretty, I think, reasonable and fair contract based on how he played last year. It was looked upon as being a breakthrough season. This contract does include a modified no trade clause in years 3, 4, and 5 of the deal. Of course, he wouldn't be eligible for trade protection until year 3. This year also includes a $2 million signing bonus, but otherwise, I mean, he had to be the main goalie last year. Obviously they had a bit of a rotation going. They've given Devin Levi lots of opportunity. Not that he hasn't been, serviceable per se, but it was clear that Levi was not yet ready to be the full-fledged starter. But eventually we saw UPL kind of take the reins and really run with their job and put up some impressive numbers. Obviously the Sabres didn't end up getting into the playoffs, but they did come close. And it was largely due to his play. I mean, he played a big role in that. So this 5-year contract is pretty reasonable. I guess the big question, though, is, before last season, and I think still many in the organization still see Devin Levi as still potentially being the starting goaltender in the not-too-distant future. So what does that mean for him? What does that mean for the tandem? I mean, it could mean a couple of things. For one, if Levi outperforms Luukkonen, well, they may have a good problem on their hands. As long as Luukkonen's play remains decent and anywhere close to last year, this contract's not going to age poorly. And if they end up with a situation where they have two guys in between the pipes that are competitive and can have a good tandem, but if they can't afford to keep both long term, then maybe one has to go. Maybe that's Luukkonen. It's hard to say. This contract will age well if he plays well. Even if Levi outplays him, that's not the important piece. It's how he plays himself. So clearly we'll see. Because long term, I think some kind of see these guys as either being a 1A, 1B, or Levi maybe being the starter. But, Luukkonen had something to say about that last year. We'll see how this year goes and see what happens. But obviously, given that they brought in, another experienced goaltender as well, it's not a given that Devin Levi is consistently in the NHL this year. So for the foreseeable future, this deal makes sense. The Sabres are, in pretty good situation cap-wise. And Luukkonen's earned this deal. So we'll see. At least they avoid arbitration and get this deal done ahead of time, which is also a big factor here. The San Jose Sharks have also signed restricted free agent defenseman Henry Thrun. He gets a 2-year deal, $1 million per season as well for him. And we get the arbitration award for Spencer Stastny, who went through the arbitration process with the Nashville Predators. Of course, he was looking for a 1-year, one-way deal around, I think it was $925, and the team was looking for a 2-year contract with both years being two-way, being $125, I think, AHL, and I think it was around $750 or $800 at the NHL level. So what the arbitrator has decided, he does get the 2-year deal. Year one, it's a 2-way contract, so $825 at the NHL level, but $400K at the AHL level, which is a really high AHL salary. You don't get a lot of those, so obviously he'll be well compensated if he has to spend time in the minors. And then year 2 next year is a 1-way contract at $850. So I think it's a good compromise from the arbitrator here to kind of split the difference, give him his 1-way deal, but into next year and a very lucrative 2-way contract this year. So all in all, I think that was settled pretty fairly. Another piece of news as well, which I didn't even realize he was still with the team, but long time NHL, almost you can call him like a hockey lifer in a way, but Cliff Fletcher, who is 89 years old, is still working with the Toronto Maple Leafs as a senior advisor, apparently has extended his contract to remain with the organization. He hasn't really had a prominent role per se, but he's been in a senior advisor role for 17 going on 18 years now. I mean, at one point he was the general manager there back in the 90s. So obviously Fletcher's been around the game a long time. They still, obviously want to get his opinion on things, and he can still be involved in some of the decision making there. So Fletcher still very much enjoying his role and still contributing to the Maple Leafs at age 89. Of course, it was a big day in Edmonton. There is a dedicated video on the channel earlier, so I will probably not go into as much in depth as I did there, but at the same time, we have since heard the press conference from the Oilers on this hire, and we've learned a little bit more information. So the Edmonton Oilers today announced their new general manager is Stan Bowman. Of course, controversial figure given his time with the Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, he was one of a few guys that have been away from the NHL for the past few years after the whole Kyle Beach controversy came down. Stan Bowman, along with former Blackhawks coach Joel Quenneville and executive Al McAdam, all three of them have been under the league and have been recently, a couple weeks ago, reinstated by Gary Bettman in the NHL and were allowed to once again seek employment opportunities. According to what we learned today, Bowman had other teams reach out, not necessarily for a GM role, but different capacities, whether it be, advisory, consultant, or different stuff. So he had lots of opportunities, but he said once the Oilers contacted him, certainly his ears perked up and was very, very interested given where the team is at. So, of course, he had a previous relationship with CEO Jeff Jackson. And, of course, Jeff Jackson, a pretty prominent former player agent, was the agent of Connor McDavid before he became the lead top dog in Edmonton Oilers hockey operations. So, of course, being a former agent, dealt with all kinds of NHL general managers during that tenure. Bowman being one of them. After a long time in Chicago, the Blackhawks had numerous players that he represented, so there was an existing relationships there. So it's not like they didn't know each other. So, of course, we knew going into this, once it was announced that Bowman had done a lot of work in the last couple of years, along supposedly with some of his other Blackhawk co-workers who were out of employment as well, to kind of improve themselves and, to learn more and spend time educating themselves on what went wrong in Chicago and what they could do differently if anything ever came up in the future and all that type of stuff. And, of course, Sheldon Kennedy, who was a big part of the Respect group, of course, one of the most outspoken people in this type of thing when it comes to abuse, and I guess you call him like an advocate, somebody who was obviously gone through it personally. Sheldon Kennedy, of course, was one of the victims of Graham James way back, along with him, and I believe Theoren Fleury was the other player that were both junior age players that were victimized by James. So clearly, Kennedy is one of the most respected guys in this field now that a lot of teams go to for advice, consultations, etc. He recently, put out a statement endorsing Bowman to be able to get employment back in the NHL. So he was present today for the Oilers announcement for the press conference. We did get a chance to listen to Bowman and Jeff Jackson take questions. And I know personally for me, I was not real thrilled when I heard them hiring Bowman. I wasn't sure that I do believe in second chances. I do believe people can learn and improve themselves, but this was something that, because of their lack of action in Chicago, not only was Kyle Beach not getting the help he deserved and needed, but the video coach who was doing the abuse went on to have other victims that they could have put a stop to. So I have serious issue with that. And everybody involved, though, has taken ownership of the situation, agreeing that they needed to do more. There's a lot of it, and a lot of this case, too, is a case of them, thinking somebody else was looking after it. Somebody else was reporting it. Somebody else was dealing with it. And you're kind of like you're guilty by association for being a bystander and not being more proactive to make sure something is being done and to make sure that your people in the organization are being looked after and getting the help they need and all those type of things. So Bowman did acknowledge the fact as well, because he was asked that he's actually had conversations with Kyle Beach. I did not know that. That was not something that I don't think publicly many people knew. So the fact that Kyle Beach He talked to him last night before they announced this today, and he's talked to him numerous times. Apparently, when he first left the Blackhawks, he did try to reach Beach. He wouldn't get back to him. Once he started working with the Respect Group, he was encouraged by Sheldon Kennedy to try again. Eventually, they did connect, had a long conversation. They kept in touch ever since. He's been doing a lot of work trying to go around to other teams to kind of promote, all the different things he's learned. And he's even done work because apparently Kyle Beach is not playing hockey anymore because he did play in Europe a bit. And he was coaching himself. And he had Bowman come out to do some work with the team he was coaching with. So clearly Kyle Beach here, who was the victim, is okay with this. Sheldon Kennedy is okay with this. So those guys, to me, like the victim specifically, is the main person that I think of in these scenarios. So I still am struggling to accept the fact that Bowman's got another job in the NHL and he's inherited a heck of a team, walked into a phenomenal job, which just on many levels still seems wrong. But the fact that Beach is okay with it, the fact that Kennedy is endorsing him, who I have a lot of respect for, does make a little easier, I guess. So I'm kind of slowly warming up to the idea that, maybe this will be okay. But I know there's a large petition. I've seen, I can't remember who started it exactly, but I've seen going through my social media being shared around looking for signatures to get the Oilers to reconsider and to remove Bowman already. I'm not sure how many signatures it was up to. I know when I seen it, it was around 3,000 or something, but that was, I want to say 3 or 4 hours ago, so I'm not sure where things stand here right now. But at the end of the day, it's been an interesting day in that sense. Like I said, a controversial figure getting another opportunity. It's going to create an uproar. There's going to be a variety of opinions out there. Like I said, I'm still not crazy about it, but the fact that the victim is okay with it, the fact that Sheldon Kennedy is okay with it, it's just kind of... I'm trying to be more open-minded here that, this is going to be okay. But for the Oilers, in the position they're in, the question I said was, do they really need to go down the road of hiring such a controversial figure when there's so many other qualified people out there in the world that could be a good NHL general manager? The roster's already set. There's not much work to do as far as immediately, except for like working on the future. Some extensions, like Leon Draisaitl needs a new extension. Bouchard, McDavid's going to be up next year. Those are big, issues for the team, and it's not a today issue per se. Like going into the upcoming season, if they won the Stanley Cup next year, I don't really think he deserves any credit. He didn't do anything, at least as of right now, to really do anything with the team. So, I think they could have taken their time, and I just don't know if they needed all this attention. They did not talk to the players. We did learn that as well from Jeff Jackson, so I found that interesting too. So anyways, curious to see what everybody thinks on the Stan Bowman scenario. So we did learn a lot more information since I put up the video earlier, so I did want to talk about that part of things. So let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see what everybody has to say about that. Evgeny Kuznetsov, we talked about the fact that he recently cleared unconditional waivers. He mutually agreed to terminate his contract with the Carolina Hurricanes, and it was believed he's heading to the KHL, and that still might be the case, but apparently it's one of those not so fast type of approach here. Apparently his agent has indicated that he's gotten a lot of interest from around other NHL clubs. As many as 15 teams have reached out to at least have a conversation. So we had one reporter indicating that they believe that the Toronto Maple Leafs were one of those teams. Of course, the Leafs seem to be on everybody, according to a lot of reporters, which I know a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at. But, at the same time, if you look at the Leafs situation, I wouldn't be shocked if they were one of the teams. They do have $1 million in space. They only have Nick Robertson left to sign, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, and he had asked for a trade. So if they don't bring Robertson back, they could use another offensive player. I don't know that Kuznetsov is the perfect candidate for them, but, based on how he played in Carolina last year after the trade, could he accept a lower role, smaller, short-term deal? I don't know. See, I know he was rumored to be getting a 4-year deal in the KHL. So I don't know what they'd be paying him compared to what he'd make in the NHL. If this is going to be more of a financial decision, or is he more motivated to try to remain in the NHL, win another Stanley Cup? I don't know what is most top priority for Kuznetsov. So at this point, I guess it's just one of those cases where he's got interest. It's not a given now that he's going to the KHL. and he could end up back in the NHL. And the only team I had seen anybody talk about was Toronto. Doesn't mean that they're definitely in there. And like I said, there was many as 15, so there's lots of others that we don't know. So I'll be curious to see how things turn out. So we'll have to follow that situation a little bit further. But speaking of Nick Robertson, who's the only player that the Leafs have really left to sign with $1.2 million in space, they could get that contract done if they can convince him to sign, that is, and be done with their business for the offseason if they don't want to bring in anybody else or make any other moves, barring a trade, of course. But there was an article in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette linking Robertson to the Pittsburgh Penguins, citing a couple of different things. One, we know the Penguins want to get younger. We know the Penguins want to add more scoring. We know the Penguins need more secondary scoring. And, of course, we have Kyle Dubas and Jason Spezza in the front office of the Penguins office now that know this player very well. So, there could be an option there to maybe bring in another player who they could probably get for fairly cheap. And it might be one of those, small prices to pay that could be like a high reward kind of player down the road if things pan out for him. So, again, no given here that Robertson ends up with his former boss in Pittsburgh with Kyle Dubas, but it makes sense that they should have interest. I mean, at the same time, like I said, there's the familiarity there. We know he was drafted as a player with a good scoring ability. He's shown flashes of it at times. We know he's frustrated with the opportunity or lack thereof on a consistent basis he's getting in Toronto, which is why he had asked for a trade. It sounds like the Leafs are not necessarily super eager to go out there and make that happen, but if the right deal comes along, then absolutely. So I guess if they move Robertson to Pittsburgh, what would they get back? That's the question. I'm not sure what Pittsburgh has that Toronto would be accepting of. Is it maybe just a pick? Is it a prospect? I mean, his value wouldn't be overly high, so it's really difficult to say. I think it's just the case of Pittsburgh maybe being a little leery of giving up on a player too soon and having him flourish somewhere else. That's always a concern for teams when they're moving younger players, so we'll have to see where that goes. But, one Pittsburgh reporter believes that the Penguins are should be in on this guy, and we'll see if they make it happen or not. Now, another player that's going to be interesting is not going to be a big name, but an interesting player, former high pick in 2019, Victor Soderstrom. We've talked about him once or twice in the channel in the past couple of weeks. Of course, former Arizona Coyote, now member of the Utah Hockey Club. At this point, it's believed that the Utah team is very open to moving him, that they'd like to get him a fresh start somewhere else. He was a player that was probably drafted too high. He's not a defenseman that's overly offensive, so the stats were not necessarily a case. If you look at his NHL, stat line, or even the American Hockey League, not going to wow you with a lot of points because that's not how he plays. He's more of a he's a really good skater. He's good first pass and, pretty good in his own end. He's more of a defensive style, defensive-minded defenseman. So when he was being drafted in that year, I remember learning a lot about him. He was more of a guy that was projected to be, possibly, I don't know if anybody really seen him being top pair, but I know a lot of the different scouting services I've seen talk about him was more of probably a top four, defensive-minded guy who can hopefully play 18 to 20 minutes a night and be very serviceable, just kind of be dependable. Might be a good D partner for somebody who is more offensive minded and has that ability and skill to take more chances, right? So apparently there is some interest, according to Irfan Gafar, who covers the Canucks. He believes that it's a name to watch for Vancouver. I mean, Vancouver at this point don't necessarily have to go out and get another defenseman. And he may not even start with the Canucks at the NHL level if they did make the acquisition. It would be somebody they could probably get for a cheaper price. And it would be more of a depth move, but it could be somebody that maybe, in the not too distant future, could work their way into being, a bigger role down the road. I mean, obviously, that 2019 draft was a time where there were some players there that, certainly have been moved around. Soderstrom could be another one. And I just really think there was, back in 2019 and even before that, the Coyotes, to me, they went out on a reach with a few players on their first round picks. They were always a team you could count on for when you heard them announce their first pick, it'd be like, oh, really? Okay. Made some interesting ones back then. And, not to say that he wasn't a good player. I just think the expectations on him might have been too high, given the fact that he was picked as high as he was. But really, he should have been a later first-round pick, and the expectations, again, would have changed. But according to what we're hearing, it sounds like there might be some interest on Vancouver's end. But we know that we have had other reports that the Utah team very much open to moving him. So it's just a matter if they work something out. And if it's not Vancouver, wouldn't be surprised to see him somewhere else. I do believe there's a good chance we'll see him get picked up. And if he's not traded, I would suspect by the time we get to training camp that he'll either be moved or end up on waivers and end up at a new home. At some point, he's going to end up going. Patrik Laine, of course, another player who's been in the rumor mill off and on here that we've talked about on occasion on this channel. Still not cleared yet from the player assistance program. We see a lot more videos being posted all the time about him training and getting ready for next year. He's looking pretty good, which is good, positive sign. We've talked about his connection to a few different teams around the league. One that came up today with the Hockey News, and Caps writer Sammy Silver was talking about Washington being a potential landing spot for Laine. Obviously, the other team that was connected to Kuznetsov, back to there with obviously him terminating his contract, freed up both the Capitals and the Hurricanes with a good amount of cap space because they both had retained half of the contract for him. So Laine to Carolina has been something we've heard and have kind of rumblings on for the last couple of years, really, to be honest. But the Capitals are another team who we know that Brian McClellan, of course, while he was GM, he's obviously moved up and they have a new GM now. But, the Capitals have been making a lot of different moves this offseason. They've added Chikrin, they added Dubois, they signed Roy. They're not going away. This is a team who's trying to remain competitive and trying to make sure that they can be a strong team and be a playoff team as long as Ovechkin continues to be part of the organization. And clearly, Laine at one point was somebody who kind of rivaled Ovechkin for the top goals in the league for early in his career. And obviously, we know things are different now, and he's cooled off. But really, it could be a case where they might add another offensive weapon there in Washington, and maybe Laine would benefit greatly from having a guy like Ovechkin on his team. He could be a terrific guy for him to be around and to kind of get that wicket shot of his back. They had similar styles in a sense with, the way they shot the puck, and both had ability to score a lot of goals. And Ovechkin this year very well could, if not this year, then next year, go on to be the all-time leader in goals for in an NHL regular season play. And really, wouldn't Laine benefit from that? So we'll see. Another team that could be in the mix there for his services. And we saw Brady Tkachuk, who was been dealing with a lot of rumors this offseason. It's been a little while since we've heard anything, but between the rumor boys, as they call themselves, on Spit and Chicklets, and then Andy Strickland out of St. Louis on his podcast, it just seemed like everybody was talking about all we need to do is trade for Brady Tkachuk, and we're going to be right there, contending for the Stanley Cup. And it's been crazy. There was never, ever any legit reliable sources to suggest that Tkachuk wanted to be moved. And today he, it was posted today, the Locked On Senators podcast had interviewed Brady. It's the first interview he's done where he's actually addressed anything all offseason. And really, like he said, he completely dismissed all the silly rumors that were out there all season, all summer, indicating that it's basically, he had to get off social media because he was tired of seeing and hearing about it. That it was coming out of nowhere. He had no idea who started it and why, where it was coming from, because he's never felt that way, never said anything to anybody like that. Still has full intentions of wanting to win in Ottawa, bring the Stanley Cup to Ottawa, win with that group of players that he's grown close to here over his career, and been training hard to get ready for next season. Talked about the last couple of years being around Matthew, and of course, in the trip to the finals last year, and then winning the Stanley Cup this year. That he's had the fires burning more than ever to get the team moving forward, to get into the playoffs, and have a chance to try to do that himself. So at the end of the day, it was just nice to see him finally, kind of shut those rumors down and put them to rest. And all the other fan bases, it just seemed like there was a period of time on social media where you turn on, your Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and you're just seeing trade propositions for Brady Tkachuk. And it just seemed like every other team out there thought that for whatever reason that they could just make a trade for him with all these spare parts, which made no sense to a lot of people, especially on the Ottawa side of things. So interesting to hear straight from him that he has no intention of wanting to go anywhere. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.